Hi everyone, and welcome back to the LXD YouTube channel. My name is Miona Aleksic, and I'm a product manager that has been working with the LXD team over the past 2 years. Now I know it might be strange to see a new face on this channel, but going forward there will be several new faces that will be contributing with videos here. The LXD team has just came back from one of our internal company sprints where we travel to a location, get to spend a week or two face to face, working together, planning together, discussing things. And one of the things that we discussed there is how can we make a better use of this YouTube channel? How can we continue to contribute here and provide video resources for those that prefer to interact with us through the video format. So going forward, we will be publishing more videos in this YouTube channel again. Now, we cannot commit to doing weekly videos like Stefan has done before, but at the very least, we will be publishing release videos regularly, showcasing and demoing all of the new features that go into both our monthly releases as well as the LTS release. But then occasionally we will be posting various videos with some interesting demos, end-to-end use cases, etc., so that we can give some inspiration to our users and showcase some interesting things that you could do using LXD. As I mentioned, there will be other new faces on this channel, as we'll have more people from our engineering team be involved in making these videos. So I do hope you will join us going forward and that you will continue to follow these new content that we will be creating. Now, this particular video is dedicated to our roadmap. As you may or may not know, we typically develop in 6-month cycles, which means that twice a year we will do the planning where we will discuss what we're going to do in the next 6 months. And then in this video, we will be sharing what's in plan from November 2023 until April 2024. I do want to mention that we do take community suggestions and issues into account when we are developing the roadmap. There are several issues that I will be talking about that were suggested by the community. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to us, post in the forum or file an issue on GitHub, and then we always triage those and take them into account when planning for the future. Before I move on to the roadmap itself, I do want to mention for those that might not be aware that MicroCloud 1.1 version has been released a few weeks ago. You might have seen videos on this channel showcasing the MicroCloud functionality, but for those that are not aware of what MicroCloud is, it's really an opinionated deployment of a LXD cluster coupled with Ceph and Oven for storage and networking in the form of MicroCeph and MicroOven. I would encourage you to take it out for a spin, deploy it, play with it, and give us feedback as we have the first version out, and we would definitely like to improve on it going forward. There is documentation on our webpage, and I will link it in the description of this video. And then on this YouTube channel, you can find a few videos that are dedicated to MicroCloud and how you can actually deploy and interact with it. Now let's move on to the roadmap itself. The first item on this list is Oven to DPU offloading. Now in Canonical, we have a team that is dedicated to working with Oven, and they, over the past couple of months, they have been working on enabling Oven offloading to NVIDIA Bluefield DPUs. And this work was done in relation to OpenStack. And now we want to also replicate that when it comes to LXD and allow LXD to control and connect an instance to an Oven deployment that is running on a DPU. The next item on the list is related to unprivileged user namespaces. So the security team would like to enable some restrictions around unprivileged user namespace creation in order to increase the security posture. At the moment, LXD disables those, but ideally we would want to find a way to not turn those security features off, but at the same time provide a good user experience. So you might have seen some GitHub issues around this and some discussions on the forum. We will be working on this functionality going forward and polishing the experience around it. The next item was actually requested or suggested by a member of the community. It's about the automatic allocation of external IP addresses. Currently, when adding a load balancer or a network forward to a network, a user needs to specify the externally available address. And then if the address is not available, the creation of the resource will fail. What we want to do instead is to allow the user to skip providing this address. And then given that LXD is aware of the subnet and the addresses that are already in use, it should be able to pick the next available address and assign it. I do want to mention we are not removing the manual address allocation, but we are just adding an automatic one in addition to the manual allocation. The next item on the list is related to improving the importing experience. So basically improving the mechanisms for importing VMs from external sources. You may be familiar with the tool that we have and maintain called LXD Migrate. We want to make further experience improvement to it so that it's easier to import VMs from external sources, so that it's easier if you want to do this in bulk, and also so that you can more easily import Windows virtual machines. The next item is kind of similar. We want to improve live migration experience as well. Currently, one has to tag VMs that can migrate, and then this turns off some performance optimizations. And then the user also has to kind of guess the size of the active memory for the system to save its state. Now, these restrictions or these choices are there for a reason, so we don't necessarily want to remove them, but we do want to see if we can make this experience better and maybe automatically turn on and off some of these optimization features when migrating requests. So if you have interest in this topic and if you have some suggestions, do let us know, and you can follow our discourse for the specifications and further descriptions on how we want to tackle these issues. The next two items are also requests from our users and community members. The first one is about VM CPU core pinning. So we would like to allow, or they want us to allow VMs to be pinned to host cores like we do for containers. And then LXD should load balance these core assignments. Currently, VMs are limited to a number of CPUs, but nothing prevents the system to assign, for example, 4 2-core chemo processes to be scheduled on the same cores on the host. If we can enable CPU core pinning without specifying explicit cores, it can be useful to control the performance on processes that are, for example, responsible for streaming or for other things. The second item is about indicating virtualization support on a node to users. So in a LXD cluster, not all nodes would necessarily support virtualization. This could be either because they are on a VM with no nested virt support, or virt is explicitly disabled in the BIOS, and therefore these nodes wouldn't be able to run VMs. And it would be useful for users to be able to detect this and then avoid scheduling instances onto these nodes. But currently LXD is missing information about this. So we want to add an option that LXD can kind of indicate virtualization support, which then you can use when scheduling your workloads. We also want to improve operation progress feedback so that all operations that interact with storage should let the client know about the process. Currently, some of the operations do return feedback, some do not, so we want to make sure that all of the operations that can do this do let the client know about the process. The next two items are related to the firmware. In the first case is about removing the 2 megabytes UEFI firmware. Nowadays, the 4 megabytes is considered as a default option, and we have seen some troubles with EDK2 updating because recent versions of EDK2 failed to fit into this smaller image with all the features that we want to have. The next item is about debugging EDK2 firmware. So we have recently seen quite a few hard to debug issues from the community folks related to the EDK2. Unfortunately, a lot of these issues are really difficult to reproduce or can be specific to the environment or to the workload. So what we would like to do is ship a debug build of EDK2 firmware in the LXD snap, and then support it, of course, from the LXD side, so that we can catch debug logs and then put it to the file, and this can help us troubleshoot and fix some of these issues that have been appearing. We have a few more items on the LXD core roadmap. The first one is the VertFirm editor, where we would like to allow modifying and setting custom EFI variables. And this would, for example, initially allow changing the boot order, secure boot state and keys, and the shim debug level. But then it could be extended to support more variable groups later on. This has also been a request by the community and by our kernel developers. And some, for example, some use cases where this could be useful includes users that just want to change the secure boot state or boot order on their LXD virtual machine, or for example, external developers that are using LXD virtual machines for debugging UEFI related projects. The next item is related to kernel module load interception. So we want to add the ability for LXD to intercept the Linux syscall for loading a kernel module coming from inside a container, and then parse this request, validate that the requested module is on the allowed list, and then load the module of the same name but from the host. Now, this is relevant because we would never load code from the container into the host kernel itself, but rather just use the request from the container to trigger loading specific modules on the host. This feature will be opt-in. I do need to clarify that, and it will be disabled by default, but it can be useful for some users, which is why we want to add it. And then the final item on the LXD bit of the roadmap is, of course, related to documentation. We have been investing quite a lot in improving our documentation, and this is not stopping anytime soon. In the last cycle, we added a method of extracting configuration options and their documentation directly from the code. This allows us to automatically generate lists of configuration options, include them in the documentation, but also generate a YAML presentation of these configuration options that then UI can consume as well. Currently, this method is used for cluster, server, and instance configuration options, but we also want to use it for everything else. We also want to add more network diagrams. I know this has been requested by the community many times because networking is hard. So we do want to add diagrams in the documentation to explain how things are connected and how networking works, so that hopefully it can clarify some of the doubts that our users typically face. And we also want to add CLI examples for different configuration options in the documentation, so that when you're looking at different configuration options that you might want to do, you can see some examples on how that looks in the CLI, and hopefully this can make it easier for you to utilize these options. Now, as I mentioned, MicroCloud is now out, the first version, but this is not LTS version just yet. We will be following the same LTS cycle as we do for LXD itself and then for Ubuntu, which means that an LTS MicroCloud will be coming in April next year. And for that, we do want to add a couple of functionalities. Now, first thing we want to tackle is just improve and polish the initialization experience. So when you run MicroCloud init and all of the prompts that you get, we want to improve it so that it can, for example, recognize situations where MicroSaf and MicroOven could already be installed. We want to have options for cases where MDNS is not available, so that user can specify the nodes manually or by IP address. We also want to be able to specify specific network interfaces for different types of traffic. So for example, you can specify that Ceph traffic should go through this specific network interface. As I mentioned, I do hope that you will take MicroCloud out for a spin. So if you have any feedback about the init process or some suggestions, please do let us know, given that we will be working on this cycle. We also want to add a disaster recovery plan for MicroCloud. As we have some customers that are running MicroCloud, disaster recovery option has been a common ask. So we want to come up with a plan that makes sense, that of course includes all the main pieces of a MicroCloud, including LXD, MicroCef, and MicroOven. Again, we are currently discussing the options and the preferred approach. If you have any requests or suggestions, we are open for receiving them. Then the next item is related to identity and access management. As you know, also on the LXD side, we have been working on enabling modern IAM tools in LXD. We have added support for OpenID Connect. We are adding support for OpenFGA. And this item is really about bundling all of that together and seeing how best we can expose it in the MicroCloud use case, and potentially enabling it in the UI as well. The next item is something that has been an issue on our GitHub page for a while. It's about scaling down a MicroCloud. So basically allowing a user to scale down the cluster by removing participating nodes. And this logic must handle migrating existing workloads as well. We couldn't tackle this sooner because we were waiting for MicroCef to enable this on their side. But now we will be, in this cycle, we will be enabling this in MicroCloud as a whole. And making sure that we have a good experience, not only when we are scaling up a cluster, but also when we want to scale it down. And the final item on the list is partially Canonical specific, because we do have a Canonical observability stack, which is a bundle of different observability tools. So we do want to develop guidelines for those that want to deploy MicroCloud and then use COS for monitoring. But we will also be providing some general alerting recommendations that you can utilize regardless of whether you're using specifically Canonical observability bundle or you're just using your own Prometheus and Grafana and interacting with the metrics API that we have. And hopefully this can be useful for a lot of users that want to have some recommendations in terms of what alerting would be useful to have in the MicroCloud scenario. The final part that I want to talk about is the low-level roadmap. Now, when we moved LXD over to Canonical, we, of course, are not stopping our contributions towards other Linux containers projects, including LXC and LXCFS, and we actually have a person that is dedicated to doing this. And then these are some of the items that have been requested by the LXC community, Linux containers community, and are concerning the low-level bits and pieces that we use. I will do my best to explain this. Unfortunately, our colleague that is a specialist in this wasn't able to join me in this video because he has fallen ill, as many of us are in this time of year, but I will do my best to explain it. And if anyone has any further questions on this, do reach out to us and then he can give you more details. The first item is related to supporting ID mapped mounts for more file systems. So first, our goal is to make support for this for Fuse file systems, which is a very popular solution for file system developers. It covers clusterFS, WebDevFS, SSHFS, etc. So having ID mapped mount support here would be great. We are still not completely sure whether this can be made universal or it would require some user space modification too. And then the second part is to check if we can also support this for 9PFS, VTOFS, and the rest of the file systems that can be supported easily. The second item is a request from the community, and it's about proper namespacing of the IPVS module. So we want to make it fully configurable inside the user namespace. The next part is about adding support for per instance configuration for LXCFS. We always have a few LXCFS bind mounts per one instance, and sometimes users ask if it's possible to disable emulation for a particular file and use host values or change emulation settings somehow, and currently this is not possible, but this can be useful for our community users, which is why we want to enable it. And then finally, the last item is related about using developing Android on top of LXD and just finishing the development of PID Max namespacing, which was started quite a while ago. And we want to finalize this and include it where needed so that our friends that are using LXD in relation to Android development can use this in a seamless way. This was all that I wanted to cover for today. Thank you for watching this video. As I mentioned several times during the presentation, do reach out to us if you have any questions, any concerns, any ideas, and keep an eye on this channel for more videos going forward. Thank you.